Welcome. This is Tuesday the 4th of September 2012 and this is Simply the Truth, live with me, Doug Harris. Thank you for joining us each week. We want to take a subject and present it as simply as possible, all the truth about that. And tonight we're looking at a guest which is a subject which is so important to so many, although the subject actually is problems teenagers face. Obviously, it's not just teenagers that face it, it's the parents, it's the friends. And so whether you're like me, looking back on the teenage years from quite a distance, or whether you're like my guest, Ros Peters, that has sort of only just left it, either way, we want to hear from you. Ros, of course, is a well-known face already on Revelation TV. Our Teens, been going. Did you ever do Our Kids before that? Yes, you did. Yes. Our Kids before that, and then Our Teens.
Yeah, back in the day.
Oh, those were the days. Winner of a number of awards for your investigative filming. And Cambridge University scholar, you name it, you're it, okay? I'm quite not sure why when you go to Cambridge you've got dark blue on, but I haven't quite worked that one out.
Nobody noticed, Doug.
I noticed those sort of things. But thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me
today. It's great. And as I say, we want to hear from you. We're going to look and start looking at in general and then some specific areas that problems that teenagers face today. Does the Bible have an answer to them? Are there things that we can do to help teenagers? Are there things they can do to help themselves? As parents looking on, what can we do? What shouldn't we do? Well, I hope we're going to be able to tackle a number of those issues tonight. Really look forward to hearing from you. Text 07781 472847, email live@revelationtv.com. So please bring all those things in, all those questions, all those comments. Really, we'll get as many in as we can. And I can assure you, Ros will be able to answer every single one of them.
Thanks, Doug.
It's a pleasure. I don't want to put any pressure on you.
No, none
whatsoever.
No
pressure whatsoever. I guess where I would like to start, I mean, I do remember my teenage years. Most people don't think I do. But is it true that teenagers face a harder time today, in today's world, than maybe in years gone by? What do you think on that?
I mean, it's difficult simply from the perspective that I've only experienced the teenage years as in these ones rather than in times gone by. But I think if anything, I think there's possibly a kind of a renewed sort of emphasis in culture and society and the media on very much about sort of commercializing people, things, particularly the sexualization of culture, I think is a massive thing. I think as well, I guess, kind of being in a more accepting, tolerant society, which in many ways is a good thing, equally, there's much more being tolerated in terms of those things I've mentioned before, which make it quite difficult, I find sometimes, to sort of make sure that you are distinctive because of your faith. And I'm at peace with that now, but my teenage years, my earlier teenage years, I should say, were kind of trying to find that balance between really making it clear that I was a Christian and living by what I believed, but also not sort of alienating myself from others, which I think I'm getting better at, but maybe that's just because people are growing up around me.
As you get older, you get better at being a teenager, is that?
Yeah, by my 30s I'll have it sorted.
Yeah, they always say employ a teenager while they still know everything, don't they? But I guess I suppose that was the heart of my question. I think things are so much more open these days. Now, I'm not sure whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. In other words, if things are hidden, do teenagers sort of go and look more for them? If they're more open, are they more likely to get involved in them? I mean, I've been involved with the occult realm for so long. you didn't have the same openness about the whole occult realm and becoming witches. I mean, I've been on programs where you've had young teenagers literally who have become witches.
Yes.
For various reasons.
Yeah.
And I guess that wouldn't have happened if there wasn't that openness in society to, well, let everybody do what they want to do and everything will turn out all right.
I think that's a very good point. I think I hear a lot of people, especially if you look at sort of any sort of parenting advice for teenagers, they're just kind of say, well, if I tell them not to, they'll just do it more. And I mean, I suppose there must be a place for that. But equally, I think the more there is absolutely no guidelines and everyone's saying find your own way, actually, the teenage years being, I mean, I think it's quite a recent sort of development also, the concept of teenager. And so I think because it's such a difficult forming period, I think if we don't have those kind of guiding voices, I mean, who's to say what we can and can't pursue? And I suppose liberty on the one hand and freedom is all very well, but I don't think we are getting the kind of guidance about what is going to be harmful to us. And I think we forget as well, perhaps as teenagers, that when you see sort of things that are forbidden or even just really strongly discouraged in the Bible, it's so, in fact, all of it pretty much is about, you know, giving the fullness of life and not getting into stuff that's going to harm you, harm others, and harm your relationship with God. And I think people are kind of maybe a little bit scared to talk in those sort of terms, which is silly, really, if you think about it. But
I mean, you said something very interesting earlier on, where you were saying you needed to be distinctive, and it seems to me that Christianity so often is portrayed, rightly or wrongly, as a belief of don'ts. If you're a Christian, you don't do this, you don't do that, you don't do the other. And yet I think when you come into the reality of the Christian life, you actually see that the Christian life is a life of do's. And it's because of what you do, you don't do this.
Yeah.
And did you find that was a problem in being distinctive? In other words, people were saying, oh, come on, Ros, you don't do this, you don't do that. And rather than seeing what you did do.
Yeah, I think that's always a danger. I mean, it's nice now, kind of being, obviously I've been sort of fresh into university and having that that time where you're forming new friendships and things. And it was very interesting to me that because it normally came up quite earlier on, and I'm very open to say I'm a Christian, and then people have a lot of these sudden preconceptions about lots of different things. And that's quite good in a way as well, because, you know, if there were sort of grey areas, they'd be like, oh, you know, is that okay? And a lot of the time, you know, it will be silly things like, yeah, that's fine, or you know, it's nice to have that sort of challenging voice as well. And not even that, but just that reminder that you're kind of being an ambassador for your faith. But I think definitely, I think sometimes perhaps it's easier to focus on the don'ts as well, because they're almost kind of the more relatable areas. They're the more sort of ground-based things. Whereas if you're thinking about the relationship with God, for somebody who's never really heard about having a relationship with God in the sense that Christianity teaches, it becomes a very strange concept suddenly. Like, so what's this prayer all about then? Why do you think you're kind of being guided by God? And that can be maybe more difficult to relate to. So in some ways, it's kind of useful to have those don'ts. But equally, I hate the fact that people think it's all about sort of living in just a very tight box, because there's so much. I firmly believe, as I said before, it's about life to the fullest, and that's what I always want people to feel that they've seen in Christ in me, if that makes sense.
No, it does. But when you come on to the teaching of teenagers, okay, you have your parents, and I mean, some teenagers have great relationships with their parents, some just do not, and there's this tremendous gap which we'll look at in just a minute. And I guess that's where the church should come in. If teenagers aren't able to communicate with their parents, or indeed parents can't communicate with their teenagers, because it does happen, the church needs to come in there somehow and fill that gap. Do you think there's enough of that? Do you think there's enough of the church sort of really understanding the angst almost of teenagers and helping them through and applying rightly some biblical principles? I've not just don't do this and do this. But you know, as you were saying there, you can have life, and this is how you do it, and this is how. And I hope we'll be doing that tonight in some of the issues. But do you feel there's enough of that?
It's difficult for me to say, purely because, I mean, I haven't lived in a big city where there's a big, thriving church community. So in that respect, the youth groups that I've been part of have always been very small. So there's kind of an element, perhaps, especially when there's a smaller youth group, whilst there is an effort being made, it's perhaps not as kind of maybe enthusiastic as there might be in some bigger churches, but I'm reminded particularly of the work of Soul Survivor, which is obviously a massive organisation, and their festivals year on year used to keep me going from one year to the next. And what I loved about that as well was it's very, the main man who gives the talk, Mike Pilavachi, is very, very straight up, very honest. He talks about sin, which is a word that is kind of a bit of a dirty word, particularly for my generation. And he talks about it in such a way that you just kind of think, why would I want to do that? You know, which is marvellous, because it's the way we should feel. And I think it's also the fact that people don't feel that instinctively but need that guidance really sort of testifies to the culture that we're in, that it's positively encouraged to just go for it. So, I mean, in terms of what the church is doing, it's quite difficult to say, but I definitely think there are loud voices who, to my mind, are getting it really right, from a young person's perspective anyway.
Yeah, great. I'm talking to Ros Peters. We're talking about the problems that teenagers face. Do you live in a big city? Ros grew up in a rural area with a small group. Do you live in a big city? Have the churches been of help to you? Are organisations like Soul Survivor indeed the survival kit for you? Love to hear from you. As parents, are you, do you have problems in communicating with teenagers? Do you just find it too much? Really want to hear from you too. So text us on 07781 472847, email us live@revelationtv.com. Now, Ros, I mean, we've already talked about what is this generation gap. Now, I gave you a list, I think, of about 10 or more subjects that I said, look, I think these are ones that we could talk about tonight. I said, would you please put them in 1 to 10 order? So, you know, so if we don't get through them all, we get through what you feel is the most important. And you put as that first one, that whole area of peer pressure and competition that forces people into a situation. Why did you put that as number one?
I think I put it as number one because I think it's something that there probably isn't a single teenager out there who hasn't experienced that. So I think that was the main thing, because obviously it comes in so many forms as well. The idea of pressuring, whether it's even just, we think of drink and drugs and sex and all the rest of it, but it might even be smaller than that, but makes a real impact. I mean, I remember, you know, even kind of when jokes were told, I certain ones I wouldn't want to laugh at, but I'd kind of feel that pressure that I should laugh. It's even small things like that that can be quite isolating, and can also take great courage and be massive build-ups to make you into a stronger character, of course. But I think it's something that every teenager faces. With regard to competition as well, I think I've particularly seen that in some of my my male friends who've got this real sort of lad thing going on.
Why is it always the men that get...
I don't know. Something to do with football, I hear. I don't know. I think obviously it applies to both equally, but in different ways. But I think I see it most explicitly in my male friends who've got this kind of, I don't know, especially when it comes to drink maybe sometimes and all that sort of thing. I'm talking about my non-Christian friends as well as my Christian ones. You know, there's a definite...
They want to beat the other person, whatever they're doing.
Yeah, pretty much. And it's a big, massive thing. And again, it's instilled in us. The pressure and the competition is totally instilled because,
When you blew it, when you knew that the pressure had so come on to you that you really had blown the whole thing, you'd done it wrong, did you go away with tremendous guilt? And if so, how did you cope with that guilt?
Wow, what a question.
I know.
That's what I do.
That's one I didn't show you earlier.
Sneaky. Goodness. I'm going to say yes. Yes, I think that's the negative aspect of that. I mean, I'm personally quite hard on myself anyway, just as a person. So even when I have little slip-ups, they feel like massive ones. And so guilt has been a big thing for me. And I think I probably could have gone down a much more harmful route had I not had that grounding in Christianity, because I'm obviously of this sensitive nature that things are going to affect me, and it's been grounding myself in the Bible and the Word. And sometimes I've had to say, look, I'm not thinking about myself in that bad way, because God says I'm this, I'm loved, I'm a child of the King, and I've had to make myself, remember that. And from that aspect, I think I used to be sad that I didn't really have a testimony as such, because I was brought up in a Christian home and I never had a great Damascus experience. But now I think if somebody was to ask me my testimony, that's definitely a massive part of it for me, is that journey from...
Yeah, because guilt is a big thing, isn't it? I mean, so you see, you get the pressure, and if you give in to the pressure, you then get the guilt. And it seems to me when you look at teenage, and I think obviously what we're talking about teenagers, but I guess the things we're talking about affect every age group anyway. But guilt seems to be a major thing, and I guess that if you haven't had that experience with the Lord, knowing that He forgives, knowing that He brings you back up again, knowing that He's going to do something for you again, I guess it really brings you down, and it takes you a while to come to surface again.
Very much so, very much so. It's a sad truth, but equally, I think it's wonderful to have that kind of the two sides of the coin, that idea that yes, we are striving for excellence, and yes, we're striving to worship God in the best way that we can, but equally, He is walking with us hand in hand. And I remember that was one of the big sort of pictures that really helped me, that idea that, having Jesus next to me, walking me through it, not miles ahead going, come on, hurry up, but, walking me through it and helping me. And that process in itself is absolutely vital to becoming a shiny person, So it's, as long as you get that positive perspective, you're generally on the home straight, I think. But having that positive perspective and keeping that positive perspective is something I battle for sometimes.
And I think it's very helpful, and you've already said it yourself. I've had problems here, I've had difficulties here. I think sometimes we can give the impression to other people that everything's all right. And I guess that's not a bad thing. We don't want to go around all the time showing everybody that we've got our struggles. Right? We want to be positive with others. But I think sometimes just knowing I've struggled, I've been through this. Yes, I've messed up at times, but I've learnt to come back to God. Yeah. I think just that sometimes can help people. And I think if you get this teaching that everything is right, once you become a Christian, you're a total overcomer and there ain't going to be any problems anymore. If you take that and you fail, you've really had it. So I think just understanding that everybody's been through these same things and come out the other side is a real help.
Definitely. And I mean, even Jesus says himself it's not going to be plain sailing, So it's kind of bizarre that some sort of Christian circles get that idea of, oh, what am I doing wrong? Things aren't going perfectly. And it's a massive misnomer. It's so important to have that, at least, I think, people that you can be honest to, whether it's just, my parents have been absolutely huge in that respect. I've also got a lovely best friend who was with me through sixth form, who really, I just felt I could really talk to him, and it was a massive help. Especially from a Christian to Christian point of view. So I think, the honesty is really important, because particularly with things like guilt, if we're talking about that negative flip side, as long as you internalise that, it will just grow and grow and grow and get poisonous.
Come on, you're using these big words. What do you mean internalise?
Sorry.
Listen, if I don't understand them, they won't out there.
So if you if you dwell on it more and more, and allow it to take root, so that sometimes it's the thought that you go to before you go to another one I think is a powerful force that needs to be that we need to be aware of, I think, and know that we're to fight against it, because it is a battle, and it's being transformed by the renewing of your mind, isn't it? Which is a process for the long haul.
There's a verse I was thinking of, which is, I think, relevant to something I just want to make a point here and ask you on. And in 1 Peter chapter 3 and verse 15, it talks about always being ready to make a defense. And there's always being ready to communicate why you believe what you believe. Because it's talking about here people, of folks who are coming along and asking you to give an account of the hope that's in you. In other words, I think this is a very real of this sort of situation where you are living a Christian life, or seeking to live that Christian life in a very secular society, in a very worldly society, and you're seeking to be different. You know you are going to hit certain issues. And it seems to me it could be too late if you wait till you hit the issues, because it's just too powerful. Here it says always being ready. How, Ros, can we be ready? In other words, as we talk about issues that we're going to face and the peer pressure, because what we're talking about is the peer pressure, we then go on to talk about those various issues that could be that peer pressure. How do we get ready to meet that and at least have a hope of dealing with it when we come face to face with it?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think the main thing is just to really know your Bible and to know what you should be striving for, and maybe working not to go into as well, and knowing that for yourself, and not just because someone's told you. And I know that might sound like a bit of a petulant thing to say, but it's really important to be grounded in it. Absolutely, it really is, because otherwise the conviction's not going to be there necessarily. And so when you are in that heat of the moment, you find that perhaps you're not as solid grounded as you thought you were. So having that solid ground of the word, I think, is massively important. And I think other than that, it's just having a day-to-day conversational relationship with God. I mean, that's massively important in my life, the idea of sort of, I'm constantly chatting to him, and he doesn't always chat back, but that's fine, because I'm still sort of involving him in all my decisions, and having him as that constant presence, even if it's in my brain. To have that constant presence is massively important for all sorts of situations.
You seem to be talking as though God is your friend, or Jesus is your friend, and I mean, you often get, and you say, Jesus is Lord, and in fact, the first part of that verse that of 1 Peter 3:15, sanctify Christ as Lord in your heart. So you get the lordship, you get the kingship. But you're also talking about that friendship. How important is it to understand that, yes, he's our Lord and we're to serve him, but he's also our friend, that you said, that wants to take us by the hand? How important is, and how do we get to know him as a friend?
It's huge. I think the big thing is, I think you have to ground it in going back to what Jesus did on the cross. The fact that he was a man and did die and suffer. It also says in the Bible that there's nothing that he didn't undergo. So he experienced every temptation and withheld it, and withstood it, I should say. Sorry. Having that grounding in Jesus as the man, as well as part of the Godhead, is huge in that, I think, because it really helps, even if it's just a helpful concept. It helps you understand sort of how that relationship would work, and how much forgiveness and empathy and care for his creation he has all wrapped up in this. I think also being the friendship thing, it really is massive, and I do think it comes from talking with the view to him talking back. Even if that's just through his word or maybe through somebody else, having that kind of expectation that, yes, he's listening and yes, he cares. And I think sort of rooting yourself in that is vitally important. Equally, I'm going back to the times where particularly I was struggling very, very, very much with the sort of guilt and thinking I was messing up all the time, and even when it was just little things. And a massive point in that was kind of I don't know, sort of readjusting the fact that, yes, as you say, he is king and he is Lord. But he's got this, he's a servant king, it says. So we've got this amazing mixture of two completely, it might sound like alien concepts, but together they make the God that we serve.
Yes.
And you can't have one part without the other.
Yeah.
And the friendship thing is huge. And I think I would say that God is perhaps not first and foremost my friend, but he's definitely, like, I'd say my mum is is first and foremost my mother, but she's also my friend, you know, so it's almost, there isn't a priority list there. It's having those two things.
It seems this is so important because I suppose so many teenagers feel if they mess up and if they go wrong and if they give in to temptation, God's no longer my friend, and they feel that. But that isn't it. Now, yes, he doesn't condone the sin, and no, he doesn't want us to do that, and he wants us to confess it and to deal with it. But he really wants to take us by the hand, and he understands. And I suppose he was a teenager himself, you know, and in that sense. And I think we sometimes lose that understanding. And I think, and I don't know if you've experienced it, but from my point of view, as I got older and grew up in the Christian life, one of the things I found I had to be so careful of is, okay, here I was, I'd been saved for 10 years, 20 years by that time, whatever it was. And I was talking to a younger person, a teenager or whatever. And I had to be careful I didn't put the level where I was onto them.
Interesting, okay.
That, you know, because they weren't there. Yes, I could share concepts, I could share things I'd learned, but what I couldn't do is say, this is where you should be, because they weren't there, they were here. Yeah. And I think we've got to allow teenagers to be where they are and to develop where they are so that they can be strong and they can grow. And that reality can come through, because if I tell them, you've got to be this, and they try and be this, they never can be. Yeah. And no reality there. Yeah,
absolutely. I think it's important as well to almost kind of value that process, because the process in itself is what makes the stronger character. And strength has kind of been my buzzword for the last couple of years, especially when I've kind of had this journey out of feeling very condemned to suddenly kind of realising the strength of Christ in me, and what that means on a day-to-day basis. But yeah, I think it is a difficult one to kind of, you know, tell people, you know, this is not what life is supposed to be like. But once you're stuck in it, it's really hard. But I think if the keynote there is love, and the love of God and the love of Jesus as exemplified through his sacrifice, then if you see it through those glasses, as it were, you've probably got a much better grounding for talking to that person who is kind of like, there but for the grace of God go I, you know, it's that helpful phrase.
We're going to deal with some of the emails that come in. Do take the opportunity to email us in, please, at this point, live at revelationtv.com, or text us 07781 472847. Join in the conversation. Some of the things we've got here are questions. Some of them things are comments. Great. That's what this program is about. It's not just me and my guest and what we feel. It's also what you feel, what you want. So please make sure you get those in, and we look forward to receiving them. This one came in, the first one that came in, it came in a little while ago. And it's from Harry Thompson. Harry is 15. Hi, Harry.
Hi.
Yeah. Great to have you with us. Very simple question. Not a simple answer, I don't think. And I think some of the things we've already shared go towards it, but maybe you can sum up some of those and add anything else. Okay. His simple question is this: how can I be more committed to my Christian faith?
Wow, that's a massive question, Harry. I think I'm going to sound like I'm repeating myself, but I'm afraid I have to. I think I have to go back to that idea of just making that space for God every day, and in everyday life, and keeping him sort of always in your mind, so that it does kind of, almost without you thinking about it in a weird sense, affects what you do and say. If we're thinking about the sort of ambassador for Christ's role, but equally that can feel like a lot of pressure. So I think if you ground it in that relationship, you actually and kind of start to work to understand the love God has for you, then all you can do really the response to that is want to serve him more. And so you've got that lovely kind of, once the ball gets rolling, if you put in the time.
So what you say is seeing who the Lord really is from his word, listening to messages, whatever, seeing who he is and responding to that person that you see. Is that what you're saying?
Definitely. Yeah. And I think the other thing to say is just to be brave, because it is brave a lot of the time. I mean, we're so blessed that we live in such a tolerant environment, but I think it still has a sort of bravery to it, just to stand and go against the grain. I think I've heard somewhere that, you know, if you go against the grain, you're going to get splinters. I think it's very expressive. But yeah, just being brave. And I think one of the things that I really hope for our teens that it does is, if nothing else, just to show people, look, hey, we're living in a similar way and we're striving for the same goal. And having that encouragement, there are other people out there, particularly, you know, if I think back to my 15-year-old self, you know, in a very small youth group where, you know, there's varying commitments there and still feeling like a little bit of an outsider, knowing that there are other people going for that same goal is hopefully a very encouraging thing.
We should do the actions to be bold, be strong, for the Lord your God is with you at the moment, but we won't. I won't. You'll all switch off if I start singing. I think I lost my train of thought.
Too excited about the song.
Too excited, be bold, be strong for the Lord. But it is true. I mean, all joking apart. But that is, you said be brave, and it really did come to my mind. But we can be bold, and we can be strong because the Lord our God is with us. If he wasn't with us, we wouldn't have the right to be bold or be strong. Totally. And it's seeing that, isn't it? It's growing in the reality of that, that he really is with me. He's in me. Therefore, I can be bold for him. He'll look up. Yeah, I will get splinters. Things will go wrong. But I could be bold because of who he is.
It's the most important because in the book, I think, because, I mean, for a while as well, when I was trying to sort of get more committed myself and really sort of be better, I guess, a better person and so on. I kind of, I thought I needed to do it in my own strength, and I kept saying, you know, why can't I get this right? Why am I not doing this well? And God sort of led me, I can't remember how it was, but he led me to Joshua 1 where it says, be strong and very courageous. Yes. And so I'm saying to God, well, how do you expect me to do that? You know, I don't feel strong. I feel weak as anything. But he slowly taught me that, you know, it's actually your decision to be strong is enough strength to make you strong, which is a massive thing.
He comes in on that decision, doesn't he, and underlines it and does it. How important, you've talked about your youth group, as small as it was, how important are Christian friends? I mean, here's Harry. We don't know where you are, Harry. We don't know what situation he's in. But how important to you were Christian friends that you could just hang around with and they could input into your life in one way or another?
I mean, I'm speaking from a particularly lovely perspective now because I've got, well, I can think of two immediately massive presences in my life. I would say my best friends who are both Christians, because we share that common bond, and it means we just understand each other on a completely different wavelength. But equally, kind of as from a year ago, I did not have that really. I had a little bit, but not so much, and certainly not from a youth group perspective. And I missed it. I missed it a lot. And I prayed quite fervently about, you know, I please send me more people who will understand this and you know, we can get alongside each other on it. I think it's hugely important. It really is. And sadly, I think probably loneliness is a fairly big problem for young people of faith, which again, I hope our teens sort of goes to dispel.
Yeah. Harry, well, I hope that helped. If you could always come back to us again if you feel we can help more, but I trust there will be other things that you can pick up as we go through.
Can I say as well, just
please
for Harry, facebook.com/ourteens, there's a constant chat going on there, and love to hear from you. So yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. We totally different subject. We did a programme on ME last week, and there is support there on Facebook. And so I mean, Facebook, which is maligned quite often, and sometimes quite rightly maligned, there are some great places where you can find that strength and can find that help and communicate with people, even if you haven't got them immediately in your area through. So facebook.com/rteens, T-E-N-N-Z. It's on the screen, I'm told.
Oh, marvellous.
They're brilliant in the control room. What more could you want? Terrific. Thanks, guys. Yeah, so make sure you go there and find help. This is interesting. No name to this one. I'm not sure I totally agree with it. I think there's a point there, but I'd like to hear what you think. All groups of people must get closer to God, right? So sort of teenagers and stop being people dependent. You need to have a disciple mentality and not give much attention to people's opinion. The devil has many people where he wants them gossiping, slandering, etc. Important to fight him alone with God's help. I'm not sure, especially after that, what we've just said about fellowship. I totally agree with that. I think we do need to understand that we have to, stand ourselves. Mm-hmm. But, apart from a number of individuals that he may have called and put in an area where you can't have fellowship, surely he wants us to stand together. That's his desire.
Very much so. I mean, God's all about community, isn't he? And he's all about the relationship. I think definitely it's not good for us to fight alone. But equally, I can kind of see if it's from the point of view of sort of being defined by other people and letting other people say so override perhaps what you would rather do to honour God. I think that's obviously a different question. But I don't think we need to go along. In fact, I'm gonna stick my neck out and say I think actually it's even a little bit dangerous when you go it alone, because there's nobody checking you, and you can even get in a harmful mindset that perhaps somebody needs to just say, hey, have you seen 1 Peter? To get you out of. So yeah, I can kind of see both sides there.
Yeah, but it needs both. I always use the phrase interdependent. We do need to be strong in the Lord ourselves, but we need others around us as well. Yeah. Jack, who most of us say, hi Doug, show's really looking good tonight. I'm really enjoying it. Great, Jack. Be good, grow in the Lord. That's what you need. Okay, that's Jack.
You have been told.
You've been told. Yeah. A comment on that later on. This is from Jamie. Jamie says, for someone who went down the wrong route and has had a couple of little Damascus moments, the very best testimonies are those like Ros who have been with God all their lives. Interesting.
Thank you,
those testimonies encourage me and give me hope for my almost 10-year-old daughter. God bless. Naz Nazrari says, when you mess up, how do you get back in your place again? And what if you realise that you can't do it? That's an interesting question. Will God let you go forever? Well, let's take that point by point. When you mess up, how do you get back into your place again? Where you should be.
I think it definitely has to be a matter of choice. I heard somebody say that the time where you want to run away from God is normally the time you need to run to him, which feels like the worst thing in the world to do. But I guess it is sort of grounding that in the idea of the forgiveness of the Saviour. That yes, there is, as we said before, there's the kingship element, and yes, there are rights and wrongs. But having that sort of, the fact that you can go to your Father and said, look, I know I messed up. I really need your help. I can't do this by myself. It's an honest prayer. And if your heart's in it, I think it's something God really honours.
What if you realise that you can't do it? Now, you can't do it in your own strength. Will God let you go forever?
I don't think he lets anybody go forever. I think he's always a knocking, as they say. I'm reminded of the verse that says that it's praying that he who started a good work will bring it to completion.
Does it pray? It says he will. It's a promise.
He will.
Yeah.
So I think that's a massive one in that respect. And I think as long as the desire is there, God will keep knocking.
Naz, you never go too far that you can't confess and repent. Yeah, but basically I'm reminded of the guy that came to Jesus and say, I believe, help thou my unbelief, okay? What's he saying? He said, look, I really believe you can do it, but at the same time I doubt myself. Fine, doubt yourself, but don't doubt God. So come before him. say, Lord, I can't do it, but you can do it in me, and really allow him to do it. I'm conscious we've all sorts of things we haven't touched upon. Even so, we're 3/4 of the way through the programme. Number 2 on your list was generation gap. What do you mean by generation gap?
I guess the gap that exists between even parents and teenagers, perhaps church leaders and teenagers. Teenagers are often quite maybe rightly or rightly or wrongly, we've got certain stereotypes attached with us. One being the sort of the very stubborn, you can't tell me what to do-ness, which is there, I'm sure. But it's tricky to. It's not necessarily good to tar everybody with the same brush. Certainly not to the same level. Because we've all got a bit of stubborn in us, I guess, and especially when we're trying to find our own way and wanting to stretch our wings and become adults. But I think there are varying levels of that, which is probably good to be aware of. But yeah, I just thought the generation gap was quite an important one, particularly considering the viewers of this programme, because if it were our teens, I mean, I said to you before, I would have probably said about stress and and friendship with God and that sort of thing. But in terms of the generation gap, I know communication can be difficult.
I remember seeing on the buses this advert where you have an older person and a younger person. The younger person says, I won't push and shove you or sort of thing. Right. And the older person says, well, yeah, I will understand that you might want to be a bit louder than me. Okay. Do you think part of breaching that generation gap is understanding each other? Wow. And that's where we have to start, trying to understand, where you were. Well, as a teenager, you can never understand these old guys, can you? But as an older person, you can remember what it was like as a teenager.
See, I thought you were going to go the other way there. I thought, Doug, you were going to say, there's no understanding these teenagers. And you know what I would go, yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I don't understand teenagers. So you flipped it over there at last minute. I think understanding is a massive thing. Even if it's just the will to understand, I think sometimes that's enough to just push communication that bit further to get more understanding. Because sometimes you can't just flick a switch and go, well, yeah, if I were in their shoes, because sometimes the gap is perhaps a little too wide. But just taking that step towards them and saying, well, there's an aspect I understand here, and communicating about it can often sort of bring about so much more understanding. So yeah, I think it's really important.
Okay, sorry, I wasn't listening to a word you were saying just at that point, because they were talking about, and they said, because you're obviously here doing some our teens programs as well, and they said there was a clip which you didn't use and not going to use about the children being ready, and they feel it's absolutely relevant to what we're saying right now. So yeah, let's have a look at this clip and see some of the things that are happening.
Tell me about it.
I mean, I can identify as that man, the father, in the chair, reading, doing your own thing, relaxing, let the kids go away and play. But I suppose what it is saying is, look, that the children can do things, and we need to be ready to learn from a younger generation as well as feel we can teach them.
I like as well, what I particularly like about that is that he's reading a newspaper. And I know that sounds like a silly point, but I think especially as you get older and you get sort of more globally away, so busy looking at current affairs and all this kind of thing. And sometimes it's children or younger people who've got this fresh vision, maybe this naivety about the world even, you might say. But in that, there's that optimism and creativity to perhaps make a particular change, which is, yeah.
We do have to be careful in not closing one another off, don't we?
Yeah.
Because, yeah, I mean, I think sometimes teenagers have crazy ideas.
Oh, yeah, totally.
But then sometimes adults have crazy ideas as well. But within that, we mustn't just say no because it comes from a different generation. It's important there. So generation gap, we really need to work at it. There's no other answer, is it, than actually to work at it. Yeah. Stress. I think every generation suffers from stress for different reasons. What causes the stress in teenagers and what can we do about it?
I think there's a number of things. I think exam stress is obviously a massive thing, that the pressure of school or college or wherever you are, I think that's huge. Equally, the stress of relationships and friendships and even that old generation gap can be a big source of stress as well, I think, because, you know, equally, you know, parents don't like falling out or not understanding teenagers, but nor do teenagers really like the setup with parents when there can't be that peace and friendship. So I think it can come from pretty much every angle. And I think it's particularly difficult in teenage years when you're still feeling a bit awkward, a bit gangly, a bit, you know, just you're not quite into yourself yet. Yeah. And you're growing up and finding more stuff about yourself and the person you want to be. And even that can be stressful, I think, because sometimes you surprise yourself in ways that you know.
But it's something you have to go through, isn't it? In other words, you cannot make that completed person too quick. They've got to go through that. And I think sometimes looking on, that's very hard. Sometimes we want to, as it were, curtail that, yeah. But there's no other way. You've got to go through it and learn it, haven't you?
Hugely, yeah. I think that's very important. I'm reminded of you're probably not going to believe this, Doug, but I'm quite a shy person.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
oh,
you'd never know, would you?
I'd never believe it in a million years.
No, I've really battled with shyness, particularly around people. I don't know what it is about cameras. I don't seem to mind them as much as people. I don't know why.
Back, you see.
That
don't
must
ask
be it.
difficult questions
that
either.
Must be it. But kind of, I think my mum at times kind of found that a bit, I'm sure she won't mind me saying, a bit frustrating because she sees me in front of a camera going blah, 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 and then in front of a person I suddenly become very shy, and she kind of wanted to push me forward. Oh, hello. Just kind of wanted to push me forward.
Just drop the microphone, don't worry about it, guys.
Yeah, but it was something that I needed to kind of go at my own pace with and work out for myself, because there were some other kind of issues rooted in there that I had to work out about how I relate to people and how I kind of cared too much about what people thought, and that had to be something that I learnt about and grew stronger in. But I know that was a very difficult thing for her to witness, certainly.
Yeah. Cynthia says something interesting. She says, I know a pastor whose eldest son has never been interested in the church, and his youngest brother is also a pastor. Do you think that some pastors may go overboard at hoping their children will always stay in the church, not necessarily as a pastor? But I don't think you should go overboard in longing for that to happen. But it comes back, doesn't it, whether they become a pastor or not, or whatever they are, it comes back that they've got to have that relationship themselves that we were talking about earlier on. You can't just force them into a mould.
No, and again, I can see how that would be very difficult because, you know, particularly somebody who's got so many more years of experience in the faith might see a person going down a certain road and thinking, I did that, why are you doing that? You know, learn from me. And I can understand that can be extremely frustrating. But yeah, I think it is giving that person, and also trusting God that you know, if you're praying for, you know, your young person, trusting that God will move in on the prayers of his people, because it's what he does.
He's good at it, isn't he?
Yeah, he is.
Moving on, sexual experimentation, drugs, alcohol, put all those things together, but of course they're all very separate in their own way. Is it really just deciding, you know, these are pleasures of sin for a season and I'm going to stand against them? Because some of those desires are very, very strong.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, how do you cope with that?
It's a good question. I think, again, I have to go back to grounding in the Word. That's where it all starts and ends for me. But equally, I think kind of having the understanding that it is very much about living a freer life, a better, I can't say it any other way, a better life, because, you know, with these things, you know, drugs, sex, alcohol, they're all, you know, very linked up with a sort of, they're propagated as a big way of life.
Well, we should say illicit sex, because obviously in the right place it's good, but certainly, yeah.
Good
from
qualification
that point,
there.
yes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And they're kind of, they're sort of shown to be sort of just all we should be living for. And it's just a complete lie. And it really drives me up the wall, because it's not the most fulfilling way to live. And I think that can be very difficult to understand. And, you know, I'm spicing this off like happy clappy, and, you know, I've had my struggling as well, you know, and saying, you know, what am I believing in, and, you know, should I be? Is it worth this struggle that I'm going through? But I'm now saying to myself, yes, it totally is, because it's life. It's life. I can't say any more than that.
Yeah. So, I mean, the reality is we need to understand teenagers, but the greater reality is God understands teenagers. Like and the reality is we've said it, and you've certainly said it in a number of ways, in certain different ways. We need to come to see who God is, and understand that He cares, and understand that that He knows when we fall, and He can pick us up. And you know, and when we deal with stress, I mean, we looked at 1 Peter 3, 1 Peter 5 has this wonderful verse where it says, "Cast all your anxiety upon Him," and you know, and God is there for us, and He wants to be there for us. And I just want to underline something you said earlier on. That, you know, the time when we feel like running away from Him is probably the time we really need to run to Him. I think that's very profound, isn't it? But it's learning to do that, because we think, oh, we've blown it. God doesn't love me anymore. I'm off. Where basically we say, God, I cast myself on your mercy, don't we?
Absolutely. And there's a precedent for that all the way through the Bible. If you look at any number of the Psalms, you know, there's a great deal of sort of sobbing over what the writer's done, and saying, don't cast me aside. And you know, obviously we're relying on this grace that you know, we believe we receive through Jesus. But yeah, I think you know, it is just a question of will above all else. I think it's literally, even when you are gritting your teeth, you know that you want to have this relationship with God, and that has to be, and that's all you need to be the driving force, even if you hate standing there in His throne room, just to make sure you are standing there, because it's then that He really, in my personal experience, and I think this is true of most experiences, it's then that He really moves in, because He shows up where He's wanted.
We've got about 3 minutes to go, Ros, and I want to ask a very serious question, if you could just share towards the end. But I think sometimes some of the pressure, some of the stress come on teenagers so much that they contemplate suicide even. And I think, you know, that they feel it's not worth living. Anybody, maybe not necessarily contemplating suicide, but feeling really down and really depressed, what message of hope would you give them tonight?
There is most certainly the world of hope, in as much as my personal experience, you know, of being in sort of a darker time, it's been believing that God loves me, even when I felt like I couldn't believe it, kind of choosing that, and choosing to believe that, you know, if Jesus did die for me, He died for me for a reason. I must mean something to Him, and being grounded in that. Is the hardest thing sometimes, but it's also the most important thing in the world. But you are so loved and so precious, you know, even if you don't feel it. And I think that's something, sometimes that's all you can hold on to, but it's all you need.
I think the other thing I would really, I suppose, again, I would say is go and try and talk to somebody. I think sometimes it's so much inside, and you just need to take that time to go to somebody that will listen to you, that will take the time to understand. None of us have got all the answers, and none of us claim to have all the answers, but we can listen, and we can pray for one another, we can encourage one another. Exactly. We've talked about Facebook.com /RTs, is that the sort of thing, sort of place you can go there and say, look, I'm really desperate, this is what happened? Is that the sort of place you can do that?
I mean, sure, that's the community we've got, but I think it's really important to go to somebody you can trust. I totally agree with that. You don't necessarily want to be telling the whole world, but if you've got people you can trust, then they're the people to go to. But yes, also, if you want the community, it's definitely there on Facebook, most certainly.
And of course, what I was going to, we better not say that after Facebook. One of the other things I was just going to talk about in the last minute was the whole thing of cyberspace and and how it affects people and the whole social networking. We have to be careful. It doesn't overtake us, but we use it in the right way and allow it to be used. Ros, thank you very much indeed for being with us tonight. I appreciate your sharing from where you are and me from my great distance from teenage years. I would never have done this program without you, but thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for being with us. If you've got needs, please do contact us and share those needs so that we can help you and you can help yourself in the Lord. Bless you. See you again very soon. Bye.